is a new poll by stoppingsocialism.com, a project of the Heartland Institute, and Rasmussen reports found that support for radical socialist policies and candidates appears high among likely voters under the age of 40. According to the results of the survey, more than half of young American voters say that they want a socialist candidate to win the 2028 presidential election, including a shocking 35% of respondents who said they voted for Trump in 2024. Additionally, 76% of respondents said that they strongly agree or somewhat agree that major industries like healthcare, energy, and big tech should be nationalized to give more control and equity to the people, suggesting that increasingly more young American voters favor radical socialist policies. And the survey included 1,201 voters aged 18 to 39. And so that's kind of wild, guys. Chris, you worked on this issue a lot. You wrote an op-ed about it. Why would these young people be growing increasingly enamored with socialism of all things? I mean, like nationalization of major industries is pretty extreme. That's not just, I'd like the usual standard boilerplate American democratic socialist, kind of wishy-washy stuff. This is like hardcore. So where do you see this going, or where did this come from?
Okay, well, I've got two things that I think are leading up to this. So number one, as most of the viewers know, I was a high school social studies teacher for 5+ years. I started my career here in the northern suburbs of Chicago at the high school that I actually went to, which shall be unnamed. And then I moved down to South Carolina and taught 5 full school years there. I was shocked, literally just like blown away when during my student teaching, I was teaching world history, and I talk about this in an op-ed I just wrote. When it came time to the Russian Revolution, my quote unquote mentor teacher, who really, he just kind of threw me in there, was like, you figure it out. So he didn't really do much mentoring. However, when it came time to the Russian Revolution, I showed a documentary about it. And I remember he specifically told me to stop, and that he wanted to go in and give the other side, which was basically a pro-Bolshevism, pro-Marxism. The kulaks were actually, they kind of deserved. I mean, and I'm just sitting there going, I can't believe this is happening right now. Okay, fast forward to South Carolina. It was the same thing. It was the same thing in the government classes, socialism, collectivism. It just hasn't been done properly. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. So Linnea, what I'm trying to say is it doesn't really surprise me that so many young people, 18 to 39 now, have a misguided view of socialism. They have been given a whitewashed version of it. And it's been happening for a very long time. It's been happening at universities and colleges across this country for even longer, but it has seeped into middle school and high school in recent years. And that's a very dangerous precedent. So there's that, okay? I also think, and some people might disagree with me on this, and that's good. And, debate is always good. Free speech, everybody. Good stuff. That several, I shouldn't say, well, a large portion of the 18 to 39 cohort, which I am a little bit older than, okay, grew up in a economy, post-2008 in particular, that is not a really robust free market economy. And I think that that's a big, big problem, because when they have grown up in a crony capitalist, big government, intrusive economy that's not really a free market economy, it makes them have a bad taste in their mouth towards free market capitalism. And I've tried to, make that point to a lot of my friends and people who argue that, well, free market capitalism is terrible. Look at the United States in the past 10 years. Well, that's actually not really free market capitalism. We've got Obamacare, we've got so many interventions, so much, government spending, blah, 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 that it's really has created disincentives, and it has skewed, the job market, the housing market, the healthcare market, all this kind of stuff. So I understand how they can be frustrated with the status quo. However, their solutions to the problems that we definitely do face would make things 10 times worse, not better. And that's really what kind of troubles me, is there doesn't seem to be many people on the democratic socialist, side of things that are saying, wait, just so you know, here's the problem. Here's why our free market economy is not working properly. And here are some ways to do that. They're just saying, take the whole thing, throw it in the garbage, and let's go Soviet Union 2.0. So that's a recipe for disaster, obviously.
Yes, how can we forget? We have a sponsor of this great show and also of the Climate Realism Show, and that is Advisor Metals. Now, if you listen to lots of conservative shows like we do, you hear lots of pitches for buying gold and silver and other precious metals. But there are so many companies out there that do that. But we want to tell you why you should trust our sponsor, Advisor Metals, and it's the man who runs the company. His name is Ira Bershatsky. He's the managing member of Advisor Metals, and he doesn't employ those high-pressure tactics that you see from other companies or deceptive marketing ploys like many in big gold. And he also doesn't deal in so-called rare coins. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you're dealing in quality bullion, and that is so much better when the time comes to liquidate this valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you will have your investment discreetly sent to your very home. And Ira, by the way, is advertising on our program because he is an America First patriot. He does not donate to Democrats. He refuses to work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party. And he, like us, abhor the machinations and the schemes of the World Economic Forum. And we are very, very proud to have him as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio and back up your IRA with physical bullion of precious metals, go to climaterealismshow.com/metals, and then you can leave your information there, and Ira will make this whole process very easy for you. Again, climaterealismshow.com/metals, and be sure to tell them that we sent you, because that helps us while you're helping yourself.
Absolutely. And I want to read off some of the results from this thing. I'm going to go through some of the questions here. So there was a surprisingly large, as I said earlier, chunk that said that they'd like to see a Democratic Socialist candidate win in 2028. And the people who answered yes to that question were also asked, among the following options, which best describes the biggest reason you would like to see a Democratic Socialist candidate win the 2028 election? The respondents were then provided with 8 options. So the one that was selected the most for them was that housing costs were too high. And that's something we talked about last week, Sam. So I want to get your commentary on this. And that was followed by the economy unfairly benefits older, wealthier Americans, followed by the economy unfairly benefits large corporations. And, you can see why they would say that, right? But based on the way the things are. But the problem is, as Chris said, that they're attributing it to the wrong problem here. So Sam, I want to hear your commentary on this. It's that whole, the young people are being locked out of the American dream issue that we had last week. So let's go.
Yeah, certainly they're feeling it, that they are locked out of the dream. Now, you have to remember that younger people just have less money than people who are older. They've had less time to save, less time to earn. So they're going to have less money, and you're always going to have an arc of wealth where the older people are wealthier than younger people. That's a perfectly legitimate situation, but it can be very annoying when you have a system that does not provide the things that people want and need, above all, housing. And this is really more an effect of the overall structure of our system, and in particular, our money. The U.S. dollar has been devalued regularly over the years, oftentimes and usually deliberately, where they say, okay, well, we'll have 2% inflation. That'll be our goal. And then 2.5 or 2.7 is okay. But what that does is that devalues the dollar over time, and that tends to go to the advantage of people who are lenders and not borrowers. And so over time, the value of housing has increased ridiculously. It's so expensive to buy a house now, and it's because the house is a real thing. The house is a real thing. Your dollar isn't.
Yeah, but Sam, one of the big reasons that we have such a shortage of housing, especially for people who live in suburbs like Buffalo Grove, where I live, is because of regulations. And that, I think, is the real core of this. The core of this is that the local governments have made it very difficult for new housing to be built. I read the Daily Herald, my local newspaper, on Sundays, and I always read stuff about the local zoning board said no to this, said no to that, said this and that, and that's what this is, I think, really about. It's big housing corporations like Pulte or whomever, they want to, of course, build houses. They want to sell houses to people. They're not being allowed to. So I think this is a government created shortage. And if I really want to get cynical here, I think that this goes into the fact that the government doesn't want us to own homes. It wants us to be renters. It wants us to not buy cars and own cars. It wants us to use Uber. So I think this is part of a much larger problem here. I don't really think the interest rates, the sky high rates, recently are kind of playing a little bit into this, but this is just a lack of housing. And it's because the government is making it difficult, if not impossible, to build housing.
That's quite true. And there has been, remember, a very large expansion of the U.S. population, which was caused by immigration. Yeah. So what you're doing is you're suppressing the supply, and you're increasing the demand. So that's going to jack up the prices. But on top of that, when you have inflation on top of all that, and it's regular inflation, you're going to make it very, very difficult for younger people to buy houses. Why? Because they have less money than older people. So when people don't have a stake in their community, and when they don't have a stake in the state that they live in and in the nation that they live in, they don't have land of their own. They don't have hard objects that they can look at, and instead all they have is social media and what do you call it, subscriptions to Netflix. Those aren't things where you say, oh, they'll never take that away from me. It's like, who cares about that stuff? The important things are your house, your land, your family. And what happens is that those things have been wrenched away from young people through all of these forces, whether it's deliberate or not, as a big plan to impoverish people and make them want socialism is actually immaterial at this point. It has happened. And it has raised the support for socialism. The teaching in the schools has done that as well. And what does socialism do? It simply gives more power to the government and takes it away from the people. And this is what we're having to fight right now, is the fact that you cannot even show people what a real free market economy looks like, because no one in our time has lived in one. Even Jim and I have not lived in a free market economy, and we are old. So that is a major problem. They don't know what that would look like. And our work here at the Heartland Institute, please support us, people, and tell all your friends to support us, because we're the really unique thin end of the wedge there, pointing out to people that, no, we don't even have a free market, even here in the United States. And we can tell you what that would look like, because we've seen it in the past. We've had it in the past. We know how it works. And things like a real currency and real deregulation and real freedom work for people. And they are what will free young people to live better lives. So it's an absolutely important point that, no, we have not even seen what a free market would look like. So let's have one.
I'm a little bit younger than you and Jim, Sam, but I do remember in the 1990s when I was, growing up, that it did seem like we had a much more robust free market economy. I mean, my dad started a business in the early 1990s. It was successful. It just seemed like there was much more opportunities. I also wrote, when my dad graduated college, after working at the Quaker Oats company as a junior marketing guy for a couple of years, guess what? He was able to buy a car and start saving up for a home. That is just not the case for many college graduates also because, they've got so much debt. My dad, he was able to work through college and pay for it. And so he graduated with no debt. So there's a lot of factors, I think, that are making it very difficult. And a lot of that is, once again, because of the government. The government got involved in, college lending. The government got involved in housing, obviously, big, blow up there. So I feel that the genesis of much of this is when the government comes in and says, we're going to make the, such and such marketplace better. What happens almost guaranteed every single time? The exact opposite. We're at 15 years after Obamacare was supposed to make healthcare more affordable, lower premiums, lower deductibles. I'm going to write about this soon because we are coming up close on the 15-year anniversary. The total opposite has happened. So that's what happens.
Well, and two, I want to, call back to last week's show again. The crime issue is definitely part of it as well, because I actually don't think that it's that we don't have housing. I think that part of it is an immigration issue for sure, especially illegal immigration, but immigration at large has been, I think it like quadrupled after 1945. It's something insane like that. But the crime issue is making it so that entire like sections of cities and the like immediate suburbs around cities are unlivable for people because of how much crime is there. And there are tons of like empty houses and ramshackle places. All of that could be housing. And so I think that's what people get annoyed about when they see, like, there was a debate a couple of months ago about opening up some BLM land for housing. And I hate the idea myself of opening up BLM land just to put like Section 8 on it. That's awful. I can't think of anything
and we mean Bureau of Land Management.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. I forgot that we have there was another BLM that has apparently disappeared.
But Lene, even that's a government sponsored activity. This should be done at the free market. If people are moving to North Carolina in droves, North Carolina should be having tons and tons of housing expansion. People are leaving the city of Chicago and they are moving to the northern suburbs, but the northern suburbs are not adding upstart, first kind of housing. So therefore, people like me have to live in apartments and the rent keeps going up. And it just puts us in a situation where we can never get ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of these things, the short of this, or what we're getting to here, is that like it's no wonder, right? That kids, combined with the bad education and everything, you can't just look at these millennials basically and Gen Zers who are, becoming enamored of the promises of democratic socialists or socialists in general, that, we're going to fix this because this is capitalism's fault. The kids, don't have the education to know that this is not necessarily capitalism's fault, but also that they are facing genuine, serious economic hardship. And it's not, like I said last week, it's not avocado toast. That's not the cause of their problems. All right. I see it all the time. And that's one of the things that's turning young people against older generations is that, being told your entire life, well, you just have to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. I did it in, the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. So why can't you do it? Kind of attitude that young people get from older generations, and it's not helpful. And we are in completely different economic conditions than there were before. Like I said last week, I have friends who have college degrees, have applied to hundreds and hundreds of jobs for like one interview. And it's not because their resume isn't good. It's because it's that bad out there. It's very, very bad. All right. So that housing costs are too high is the number one most selected option under why they would support a democratic socialist candidate. The second one, the economy unfairly benefiting older, wealthier Americans. But we said, if you're older, you're going to be wealthier, probably. If you're doing things right, you are wealthier when you're older. And then the economy unfairly benefits large corporations. And that's another government-caused issue, right? Basically just bailing out all these big companies forever and ever, handing more and more power over the economy to large corporations. I think there was a lot of rightful bitterness that got generated during COVID when you saw places like Walmart being allowed to be open when mom and pop grocery stores had to shut down, that kind of thing. So yeah, we've just been, piled and piled and piled on. And so these kids are trying to look around and find something better. And so far, it seems to a certain extent, a lot of the right, even libertarians, have not been overly compelling, according to our polling here, in their alternative solutions. So this might be in part a messaging problem. Let's see here.
I was going to say, just Linnea, real quick, that the environmental regulations are also killing.
Of course,
a lot of housing construction. Think after World War II, when like Levittown was built and all these huge suburbs, they were built so fast. And nowadays, like I said earlier, I mean, if the zoning approval board actually gives them the green light, it's like 6 years later that they finally break ground, and then they've got to make sure that they only don't go this high, and there's a lot of that stuff as well here too.
Yep, absolutely. Some of the other questions that were in the poll that I found pretty interesting. There was one that asked for, like, who was, if you were voting for Trump or some other candidate, or did you not vote? Once again, it was mostly women that voted for Harris, according to the polling. Trump was about 50% men. 50% of men voted for Trump, according to this poll. And a significant amount of people, when they were asked, if the Democratic Party's presidential primaries were held today, and the candidates were Kamala Harris, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, Gavin Newsom, and Zohran Mamdani, who would you vote for? 36% of the total people who voted said Kamala Harris. So I don't quite know what to make of that. It's Ocasio-Cortez got one of the lower scores at 9%, which actually surprised me. I feared that it would be much higher. Mamdani got the bottom-most rating. Some other candidates, so people who are like, I'll take anybody else, I don't care.
I do think some of that's based on name recognition. Just want to throw that out there. Yeah.
No, I believe so as well. I absolutely do believe so. Newsom got only 9%. Sanders polled higher. So I do believe that most of this is a name recognition issue, but it is kind of funny. It cracked me up that 11% said that they just wouldn't vote if they were given all of these choices. And that was one of the higher segments of people. So that's great.
If I could only vote for those people, I might not vote either.
Yeah, that was an awful difficult one. Yeah,
I think it's interesting that Ocasio-Cortez, who had been sort of laid out as the candidate of the future, the Democrat of the future, got so little support from the voters of the future and very much of the present time. I think that's very interesting, because Ocasio-Cortez has been very front and center about being a socialist, and Mamdani has been very front and center about it, and he got 4%. Newsom, very weak, only 9%. I think it's interesting because these are people who are self-described interested in socialism, and yet they overwhelmingly went for these so-called moderate, but let's say the least overtly socialist of that group in Harris. Yeah. And so I think it may have a certain amount to do with name recognition. It always does. But it's not as if these people have not heard of Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie Sanders or Gavin Newsom. They've heard of them. They don't like them. And that's very interesting.
Can I point out a couple of things on the crosstabs here on this poll that I found pretty fascinating? Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's worth reminding the audience that this poll was taken of just younger voters. So just voters between the ages of 18 and 39. So Linnea's generation and younger. And it should be also pointed out that these voters, and it actually leaned more on Democrats than it did Republicans, these voters still gave Donald Trump a 48% approval rating, which is better than the approval rating of Biden by miles. and even better than Obama's. So it's this weird dichotomy of people who you could say are at least, Trump friendly, if not full-throated supporters, still hold these socialistic views. And one of the questions that really stuck out to me, and I'm really glad. I should also say we partner with Rasmussen. Heartland Institute does for these polls. The pollsters at Rasmussen are always not shocked, but just like amazed that we come up with these questions that end up with these results that can really dig down into what America is thinking about, especially when it comes to socialism. But one of the questions here was, do you agree or disagree with this statement? Major industries like healthcare, energy, and big tech should be nationalized and give more control and equity to the people. And it was 39% strongly agree, 37% somewhat agree. So what is that? That's 76%? Is that what that is? Did I have that right?
Yeah.
Think that major industries like healthcare, energy, and big tech should be controlled and run by the government. And something that is really shocking to me is that 40% of Republicans strongly agree with that socialistic statement. There is a major education problem in this country. I'm blaming you, Chris, that these people have come up through the system and don't, even if they are Republicans and even if they support Trump, think basically we need to nationalize industries like healthcare, energy, and big tech. All that would do is it's already done. We basically have government controlled healthcare, and it's very expensive, and it's not quite like Canada, but it's not great. The free market is real. Yeah, Sam and I are old enough to remember. We're not even old enough to remember when the free market worked in healthcare either, because we're all younger than Medicare. I think, at least I am. But what do you think would happen if government controlled energy? We'd have very expensive energy and less of it, and we almost got that under Biden, as a matter of fact. And if they control, and what if the government ran big tech? We'd still be, I don't even know if we'd have any technology. We certainly wouldn't have AI if government was running big tech. And so to have these socialistic views, again, I was not able to be on the podcast last week, although I did check in on the road from the Ohio Turnpike, and I really enjoyed it, that discussion. But it's weird. I mean, it's not weird, but it is no wonder that younger people in America feel left out of society, feel left out of this economy, feel that if the economy ever gets better, and I think it's going to get better, that they will be left behind. It's not surprising they have that attitude, because they've come up and they haven't been able to afford things, and things are expensive, and it's hard out there. And it's and saying again, my generation and older saying, hey, tough it out. I mean, I didn't own a home until I was in my late 40s, and that was in the Trump economy, I suppose. But that's just my experience. But it's for sure that an entire generation, maybe two generations of Americans, just don't feel optimistic about the future, and they have really been given very little reason to feel optimistic. And so, yeah, you would think, great, the government should probably take it over anyway. How could it be worse than it is now? I got news for you. It could be a lot worse than it is now.
It could be worse.
Yeah, but Jim, I'd be willing to bet if you asked them to really define what nationalizing an industry means, that they would not be able to comprehend that. I don't think they really know what that means. I think they just think, oh, that just means like it'll be more fair. It's like, no, that's not what it means. So I think that's another thing that their ignorance of how economics works was very on display when I was just teaching really basic, like macroeconomic stuff. I mean, like the most basic of the basic, like supply and demand and stuff like that. They just really couldn't understand it, or just weren't willing to understand it, or maybe just didn't believe it. I don't know.
It's interesting because Trump has been known to sort of badger industries and go after particular companies and so forth. So a lot of people who support Trump clearly must have voted for strongly agree or somewhat agree on that issue. So I don't think they are thinking of sort of the what we know to nationalism to be. I think they're thinking of something different, that you're sort of jawboning, which is a very different thing, of course.
Mhm.
Although all the government's intrusion in these things is cumulative. You don't get much. You don't get much going back. You get this ratchet, the socialist ratchet, as Margaret Thatcher put it. So it's cumulative, and it becomes more and more oppressive to the economy. And these young people are reacting to the fact that they've grown up in an era where the American economy has been so suppressed that we can't be Americans because, you can build things. Well, you can't when the government won't let you.
Sam,
And that's our problem. You can't
Sam,
even say things in Britain, so it could be worse.
Sam, you and I have talked about this over the years. This idea that everything's a zero-sum game. And I remember when I was teaching about the Gilded Age, and it was the standards from South Carolina were robber barons are terrible. They took advantage of the work and all this stuff. And it's like, well, that's not really the true story of how that happened. So I think that a lot of young people think that everything is a zero-sum game. Bill Gates gets rich off of other people's like misery. No, he doesn't. He gets rich because he provides software that people wanted to buy, or
Right.
or Amazon. Jeff Bezos. He just is this super greedy guy that just takes everyone's money. No, he doesn't. He offers a service that people want that makes their lives better. So that's, I think, another big part of this is the envy factor, the zero-sum game factor, the oppressors versus the oppressed factor, all that kind of stuff. And I tried to always tell my students, guys, if you work hard, and you get a high school education and you don't have a child before you get married, your odds of attaining the American dream are like almost guaranteed. It's when you don't do those three things, or when you start to blame others for your lack of success, that things start to go downhill. So, I mean, I understand that the current economy is not as dynamic as it once was. I think we are moving in the right direction. I'm very happy that we are reshoring some of those high-paying manufacturing jobs. I think that that's going to really help. And I do think that we are on the cusp of this golden age for the American worker, but we're not there yet. And I think in the meantime that we are going to have this struggle between the leftist demagogues like Mandami, who say there's a cost of living crisis in New York City, and the only thing that we can do is have city-run grocery stores and a UBI and free this and free that, when anyone with half a brain knows, well, that's just going to make everything 10 times worse. So I think it's incumbent upon us, and that's why I love what I do, because we get to challenge that, that false narrative. And hopefully we're polls like this, open up people's eyes, and, that's all we can hope for. So I'm going to be the most optimistic person you've ever seen from here on out, guys.
Government suppression of economic
glasses for me.
We're gonna have
economic freedom has absolutely demoralized young people, is what this poll says, in my view. And it's the same thing that's happening in Britain and happening across Europe. And we can change this. We have to.